Rain poured over the cracked pavement as a poor single mom bent beside a shivering beggar outside the grocery store, pressing her only umbrella over his trembling shoulders. Her worn jacket clung to her skin, her shoes soaked through, yet she smiled softly as she offered him half of her son's lunch, because kindness, she believed, cost nothing. The beggar lifted his head, his eyes not quite matching his ragged clothes, too sharp, too knowing, too wealthy. But how could a poor single mom ever suspect that the beggar she pitied was a billionaire in disguise? And why, after that night, did he return? Not to ask for food, but to offer to adopt her child. What could possibly drive a billionaire beggar to make such a shocking offer? The streetlight flickered above the small diner where Emily Parker worked late shifts to keep her son fed. The smell of burnt coffee and grease lingered in the air as the clock ticked past midnight. Her apron was stained, her fingers rough from endless scrubbing, but her eyes, tired as they were, still held warmth when she thought of her 5-year-old Liam, asleep at home with the neighbor watching him. Every night she whispered promises to him, promises she wasn't sure she could keep. A better life, a real home, a future. But dreams cost money, and Emily barely earned enough to keep the lights on. When her shift ended, she stepped out into the rain, clutching her worn-out purse and a paper bag with leftover fries, her son's breakfast. The world felt cold, indifferent, but she had learned long ago that kindness was her rebellion against cruelty. That's when she saw him again, the beggar who had been sitting by the corner for 3 nights straight, wrapped in a filthy coat, head bowed under a soaked hood. Something about him felt different. His posture wasn't that of a broken man, more like someone waiting, watching. Emily hesitated, her instincts torn between fear and pity. But the memory of going hungry as a child overpowered her doubt. She knelt beside him, her knees pressing into the wet sidewalk. "Sir," she said softly, "you'll catch your death sitting out here. At least take this." She handed him the paper bag. He looked up then, and for a split second lightning flashed, revealing eyes that didn't belong on a beggar. Piercing blue, clear as glass, the kind that had seen boardrooms, not backstreets. He took the bag slowly, studying her face as if memorizing it. "You shouldn't give away what you barely have," he said, his voice deep but steady with a strange gentleness that unsettled her. Emily gave a tired smile. "I've been worse off than you might think. And someone helped me once. I'm just passing it on." The man's lips twitched into what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Kindness looks different on everyone," he murmured almost to himself. "Some give coins. You give hope," she chuckled lightly. "Hope doesn't pay the rent." He glanced toward the bag, then back to her. "Maybe not, but sometimes it changes lives." There was something haunting in the way he said it, as if he wasn't talking about her at all, but about himself. Emily didn't press. She stood brushing water from her jeans. "Stay warm, okay?" she said softly. "And if you ever need a warm meal, I work at Manny's Diner 2 blocks over. I can get you something." He nodded once, his gaze following her as she walked away under the flickering streetlight. What Emily didn't see was the way his expression changed the moment she turned. The beggar, whose name wasn't David like the street called him, but Alexander Reed, watched her disappear into the mist. Billionaire, founder of one of the city's largest investment firms. A man who once thought he could buy happiness until betrayal stripped him of trust and grief drove him into anonymity. For weeks he had wandered the city searching for something real, something untainted by greed or fame. And that night in the rain, he had found it in the gentle kindness of a poor single mom who had nothing yet gave everything. Back in her apartment, Emily tiptoed past the creaking floorboards to where Liam slept, clutching his threadbare teddy bear. She brushed her fingers through his golden curls and whispered, "Someday, baby, we'll have more than this. I promise." Her voice broke on the last word. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out a photo from her pocket. Her late husband, Michael. He'd died in a construction accident when Liam was 2. Since then, every day had been a battle. Every night a prayer. But she had no idea that the stranger she had fed would soon become the answer to that prayer, or the storm that would change her life forever. 3 days later, he returned. This time, he stood outside the diner's glass door, raincoat gone, hair trimmed, but his eyes the same piercing blue. Emily froze when she saw him. "You again," she said, surprised. "Didn't think I'd see you clean-shaven." He smiled faintly. "You offered me warmth. Thought I'd repay the favor." She raised an eyebrow. By showing up at my job? He chuckled. By offering you something better. Before she could reply, a car splashed through the puddle near the curb, drawing her attention. When she looked back, he had placed a folded paper envelope on the counter. If you ever need help, he said quietly, don't hesitate. And then he was gone. Inside the envelope was a business card, no company name, just his name, Alexander Reed, and below it, a handwritten note that made her heart race. Would you trust me enough to let me help your son? She clutched the card to her chest, breath trembling. Who exactly was this man she'd pitied on the street? Why would a beggar, now seemingly a stranger of wealth, want to adopt her child? And most hauntingly, what secret was he hiding behind those blue eyes? Emily's hands trembled as she reread the note, the words blurring from the rain that had seeped into the paper, or maybe from the tears she hadn't realized were falling. Would you trust me enough to let me help your son? It sounded absurd, almost cruel, like a joke from the universe. She wanted to tear it apart, throw it away, pretend she hadn't seen it. But something in that man's eyes, those deep, searching eyes, wouldn't let her. They weren't the eyes of a liar or a predator. They were the eyes of someone who carried too much truth. That night she couldn't sleep. The flicker of the ceiling bulb cast faint shadows across the cracked walls of her apartment. Liam lay curled up beside her, small hand resting on her arm. Emily brushed his hair back, whispering a silent prayer. If there's any mercy left in this world, don't let me make a mistake with him. Morning came with the smell of damp and the sound of city noise echoing through broken window seals. She dressed Liam for school and walked him to the bus stop, her mind replaying the night she met Alexander, the way he had spoken like someone who knew loss, the way he had looked at her son's picture on her phone the night she showed it, like it meant something. After Liam's bus drove off, Emily stood there for a long time, clutching the envelope. Finally, she called the number written on the card. A voice answered, calm and controlled. Alexander Reed. She froze. It's Emily from the diner. You left this. I was hoping you'd call, he said, his tone quiet but purposeful. I'd like to explain if you'll let me. Somewhere neutral. Emily hesitated, glancing around as if the world might judge her decision. Okay. There's a park across from the old library at noon. I'll be there. When noon came, Emily sat on a wooden bench under the pale sun, her heart pounding. The wind played with her hair, and the sound of children laughing nearby cut through her anxiety. Then she saw him. No longer in rags, his posture now straight, his walk composed, wearing a dark coat that fit perfectly. Not the kind you'd find in thrift bins. His transformation was almost unreal. He stopped a few feet away, offering a small nod. You look like someone deciding whether to run or stay. I'm not sure which one's smarter, she said. You look different. He sat beside her, hands folded. You deserve the truth. I wasn't honest with you that night. Clearly. He took a slow breath. My name is Alexander Reed. I run Reed Holdings. Her brows furrowed. The investment company? That's you're him? He gave a faint, sad smile. Once, until I lost my wife and son in an accident 2 years ago. Everything after that felt meaningless. So I left it all. The suits, the boardrooms, the headlines. I became no one, a beggar in my own city. Emily stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the pieces. Why tell me this? Why pretend to be someone else? Because the world I lived in was filled with people who only saw money. I needed to see humanity again. You showed me that, his voice softened. You gave me food when you had none to spare. You looked at me and saw a person, not a burden. That kind of kindness, it changes a man. She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. And what does that have to do with my son? He turned to face her fully. When you spoke about Liam, about how you wanted to give him more, I saw a reflection of what I lost. I'm not asking to take him away from you. I'm asking to help, financially, educationally, to give him the chances my son never had. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You want to help because you lost yours? He nodded. Because I know what it's like to have your world ripped apart. And because I saw something in you, strength without bitterness, love without condition. She stood, heart thundering. Mr. Reed, I don't know if I can trust this. People don't just show up and offer miracles. There's always a cost. He rose too, meeting her gaze. Then let me prove there isn't one. He reached into his coat and handed her a small envelope. This isn't charity. It's a start. Inside was a check, more zeros than she'd ever seen, enough to pay off every debt she had. Enough to move out of that apartment. Enough to breathe, her voice cracked. I can't take this. Then don't think of it as taking, he said softly. Think of it as me saying thank you for reminding me what kindness looks like. Emily looked at the check, then back at him. For a moment, the world went quiet. Her mind spun with memories of eviction notices, unpaid bills, nights she cried herself to sleep praying for a break. And now here was one, but wrapped in mystery. Finally, she whispered, "If I say yes, what happens next?" Alexander's expression flickered with something unreadable. "Then I'll make sure your son never knows what it feels like to go hungry again." He paused. "But if I'm being honest, it's not just him I want to help." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He looked at her like someone seeing sunlight after years in darkness. "I want to help you too, Emily, whether you let me or not." A silence fell between them, thick, charged, and full of questions neither dared to ask. Then he turned, leaving her with the envelope still trembling in her hand. As he disappeared into the sunlight, Emily sat frozen, her heart warring between fear and hope. She had no idea that saying yes, or even considering yes, would change not just her life, but the future of everyone she loved. Because Alexander Reed's offer wasn't simple generosity. It was redemption, and redemption always came with a price. The following week passed in a blur of disbelief and restless nights. The check still lay untouched in Emily's drawer, as if spending it might shatter whatever fragile spell her life had fallen under. Every time she opened that drawer, she felt torn, one half whispering that miracles don't come without cost, the other begging her to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was her long-awaited answer. At the diner, she found herself looking toward the door every time the bell rang, half expecting Alexander to appear again. But he didn't, not for days. The absence made her chest tighten with a mix of relief and disappointment she didn't want to admit. She told herself she didn't care. She was fine. She'd gotten by before him, she'd get by after, but then Liam fell sick. It started with a cough, small at first, then deepened into something that clawed through his chest by nightfall. The free clinic was closed, and the ER nurse barely glanced at them before muttering about costs. Emily clutched her son's hand, panic threading through every breath. "Please," she whispered to the nurse. "He's burning up." But there were forms, delays, and numbers she couldn't afford. Desperation tightened around her ribs. Then she remembered the card. Her shaking hands fumbled for her phone. When Alexander answered, his tone changed instantly at the sound of her voice. "Emily?" Her voice broke. "It's Liam. He can't breathe right. I don't know what to do. Where are you?" "County Hospital. Stay there. Don't move." 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. The doors opened and Alexander stepped out, no longer the beggar in rags, but the billionaire in command. He moved with urgency, talking to doctors who suddenly rushed to obey. Within minutes, Liam was admitted, examined, treated. Emily sat outside the room, trembling, watching as Alexander spoke with quiet authority, his eyes flashing with the same protective fury she'd once only seen in herself. When it was over, Liam slept peacefully. The worst passed. Emily exhaled, her tears spilling freely now. "I don't even know how to thank you." Alexander sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the small boy behind the glass. "You don't have to thank me." "You already did," she frowned softly. "When?" "The night you gave me half your son's lunch," he said. "I had money, power, everything, but I hadn't felt seen in years. You did that without asking for anything in return?" Emily's heart twisted. "You could have gone anywhere for help. You didn't have to come to me." He looked at her then, and something raw flickered behind his eyes. "Maybe I did." There was silence between them, filled with everything neither dared say. The hum of hospital machines, the distant echo of footsteps. It all faded until there was only the steady rhythm of Liam's breathing and the thunder of their unspoken connection. After a while, Emily spoke, her voice soft. "When you said you wanted to help him, you meant this?" "Yes," he said. "And more." He hesitated, then added, "Emily, I know it sounds strange, but when I lost my family, I lost myself too. Seeing you fight for your son, it reminded me of the man I used to be. You gave me a reason to care again." Her eyes glistened. "You think helping me will bring them back?" "No," he whispered. "But maybe it'll help me make peace with what's gone." She turned to face him fully, searching his expression. "And what happens when you've made peace?" When you realize we're just another reminder of what you lost. His jaw tightened. Then I'll remind myself that sometimes the reminders are the only things worth living for. The words hung in the air like a promise neither wanted to name. Days later, Liam was discharged with a clean bill of health. Alexander covered every cost, leaving the hospital staff whispering. Emily tried to repay him somehow, bringing him coffee, refusing to let him pay for her cab rides, cooking meals as thanks, but he would only smile and say, "You've already given me enough," and yet, beneath that calm exterior, Emily sensed a shadow. Some nights she'd see him standing by the hospital window, staring at the city lights with eyes full of ghosts. She wondered what demons haunted him, what guilt he carried behind that polished smile. Then one evening, as she walked Liam home from school, she found Alexander waiting near her apartment building. He looked different, unsettled, restless. "Emily," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you." Her pulse quickened. "Is everything okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but I need you to hear this before anyone else." He reached into his coat and handed her a file. Inside were papers, legal documents notarized and sealed. Her eyes widened as she read. He wanted to establish a trust fund for Liam, enough to cover his education, future, and beyond. Her hand trembled as she looked up. "This is too much. It's not charity," he said firmly. "It's insurance. For his dreams." "But why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why me? Why us?" He hesitated, then said the words that stopped her breath. "Because when I lost my family, I promised myself that if I ever found someone who reminded me what love looked like, I'd never let them struggle alone again." The wind rustled between them, carrying the weight of the truth neither could escape. Emily felt her throat tighten. "You can't replace them with us, Alexander." "I know," he said quietly. "But maybe I can protect you the way I couldn't protect them." She looked at him then, not as the beggar she once pitied, nor the billionaire she now feared to trust, but as a man broken by grief and rebuilt by compassion. And though she wanted to say no, her heart whispered yes. She nodded slowly. "Okay, but if you're going to be part of our lives, you do it as yourself. No secrets, no masks." A faint smile crossed his lips. "Deal." Neither of them noticed the black car parked across the street or the camera that clicked quietly through the open window. Someone else had been watching, and the story of the poor single mom and the beggar billionaire was about to become very public. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of knocking. Soft, hesitant at first, then urgent. She threw on her robe, heart thudding, and opened the door, to find two journalists holding cameras, their faces lit with curiosity and greed. "Miss Parker?" one asked, flashing a badge from the City Tribune. "We'd like to ask a few questions about your relationship with Mr. Alexander Reed." Her stomach dropped. "What relationship?" There must be some mistake." "Oh, we don't think so," the man said smoothly. "We have photos. Him visiting your apartment, picking up your son from school, the hospital bills he paid. People are wondering why a billionaire would suddenly care so much about a poor single mom. Care to comment?" Emily's hands shook. "Leave, please." They didn't move. Cameras clicked. Words like affair, hidden family, gold digger spilled from their mouths like poison. Liam, awakened by the commotion, peeked from behind her legs, his small face confused and frightened. That was when Alexander appeared. He stepped out of a black car at the curb, his expression a storm of fury and protectiveness. "Enough," he said, voice low but cutting. "You will not harass her." The reporters froze. "Mr. Reed, then it's true? You're involved with her?" His jaw tightened. "I'm involved in protecting a woman who showed humanity when the world didn't. Now leave before I make this a legal matter." Cameras still flashing, they retreated, satisfied they'd already gotten what they needed. Emily turned to him, trembling. "What did you do? Why are they saying these things?" He looked at her, guilt flickering behind his calm. "Someone leaked it. Maybe from the hospital. I'll handle it." "You'll handle it?" Her voice cracked. "They just called me a gold digger in front of my son." He stepped forward, his eyes softening. "Emily, please. I never wanted this to happen. I should have been more careful." Her anger trembled between heartbreak and exhaustion. "I trusted you, Alexander. You said no secrets," he swallowed. "I meant it. But I didn't expect the world to twist something pure into scandal." She turned away, arms crossed tightly. "That's easy for you to say. You can hide behind money. I have to live here with people whispering, judging, thinking I'm using you." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Liam tugged at her robe. "Mommy, why are they saying bad things?" Emily knelt, pulling him close. "Because some people don't understand kindness, baby." Her voice shook. "But it's okay. We know the truth." Alexander's gaze softened. He looked down at them, mother and child bound by something deeper than he'd ever known, and made a decision that would change everything. The next day, he called a press conference. Cameras lined the marble steps of the Reed Foundation headquarters. Reporters whispered eagerly, waiting to devour the story. Alexander stood at the podium, composed but resolute, as flashes exploded across his face. He began quietly. 2 years ago, I lost my wife and son. In that darkness, I walked away from everything I built. I lived among strangers, stripped of my name, to see what the world looked like without privilege. A murmur spread through the crowd. And during that time, I met a woman, a poor single mom who gave half her son's food to a man she thought was a beggar. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She just saw someone who needed help. That act reminded me of the humanity I'd lost. She didn't chase wealth. She gave compassion, and that's what wealth really is. Reporters leaned forward. Alexander's voice grew firmer. Her name is Emily Parker. She is not a gold digger. She is the most selfless person I've met. Any help I've offered her or her child is not out of pity, but gratitude. He paused, his gaze flickering toward Emily and Liam standing in the crowd. I owe her my redemption. The words echoed through the hall, silencing the frenzy. For the first time, the world saw the truth. 2 broken souls who had healed each other in unexpected ways. Afterward, Alexander found Emily behind the stage, tears glimmering in her eyes. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, he said softly. I did. You saved me long before I ever tried to save you. She looked at him for a long moment, her anger dissolving into something gentler, deeper. You still think money can fix everything, she said quietly. No, he replied. But honesty can. For a while, neither spoke. Then, as if fate itself conspired to lighten the air, Liam ran up, clutching a paper in his hand. Mr. Reed, look! I drew us together. Alexander crouched, smiling. The drawing was messy, 3 stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. But it carried more meaning than any deal he'd ever signed. He felt something stir in him, fragile but alive. You think I belong in that picture, buddy? Alexander asked softly. Liam nodded, grinning. You helped Mommy, your family now. Emily blinked back tears. He doesn't understand what that means. Alexander's gaze didn't waver. Maybe he understands it better than either of us. That night, as the city lights flickered outside Emily's window, she sat with Liam asleep beside her and thought about everything that had happened. The scandal, the headlines, the confession. Her life had been chaos, survival, struggle. Now for the first time, it felt like possibility. When her phone buzzed, it was a message from Alexander. You once said hope doesn't pay the rent, but maybe it builds something bigger. Tomorrow, I'd like to show you the house I've been restoring. Not for me, for you and Liam. A home. She stared at the screen, her heart twisting. She thought of the night she'd met him, the soaked coat, the broken eyes, the way kindness had bridged 2 worlds that never should have met. The next morning, she went. The house stood at the edge of the city, sunlight spilling through tall windows, laughter echoing faintly from the garden where Liam chased butterflies. It wasn't a mansion, it was warmth, safety, and peace carved into brick and wood. Alexander stood beside her, hands in his pockets, his tone almost shy. I didn't build this for appearances. I built it for redemption. For the people who reminded me I was still human. Emily turned to him, the breeze lifting her hair. You didn't need to build a house for that, Alexander. You just needed to believe it. He smiled faintly. Maybe I finally do. They stood there, silent, watching Liam run across the grass, his laughter filling the air like a promise. The poor single mom and the beggar billionaire, 2 souls from opposite worlds, had found something neither had expected. Not wealth, not charity, but family. And as Alexander reached for Emily's hand, she let him, because sometimes the most shocking thing isn't what a man offers, but what love quietly becomes when kindness writes the story.